I'd like you to meet Kevin, my Random Orbital Sander. Recently, a bunch of Kevin's mates got themselves a brand new swanky home, and Kevin's a bit jealous because he lives in a box. He has quite the wardrobe that he needs to be able to store, because Kevin loves getting dressed up, going for walks, some good old suction, spinning out, and dreaming of a brand new home. But mostly, Kevin just loves making sawdust. And in true making sawdust style, this project will be completely scrap wood, because you got to use what you got and not what you ain't. Whenever you're trying to use up the bits and bobs that are lying around the workshop, start with the biggest piece. Here I am chopping down to length the two sides of the sanding station, and then using my straight edge guide just to give me a clean edge on one side, roughly chopping them in half. Then I can take the two sides, line them up together, and rip off the other edge to make sure they're exactly the same width. Using the width of the side panels, I can set the stop lock to give me the correct dimensions for the top and the bottom of the sanding station. The top piece will be significantly narrower than the bottom piece, as later on I'm going to put a bit of an angle on here just for a nice aesthetic detail. Kevin himself jumps in to help with the sanding. I do like to sand all of my pieces as I go, and as these rough construction bits of timber need it, it saves time down the track. No pocket holes today, shock horror! We're going to be using rebates and dados in order to assemble the vast majority of this little sanding cabinet. Over at the router station, I have set myself up a test cut to ensure that the rebate is the correct width. I can't give you any dimensions here because every single piece of plywood was a slightly different thickness, having all been found in the gutter. The straight edge guide is not only useful for Chris, my circular saw, but in just a few seconds I can put the 12mm router bit in and reset my guide stops for that. So I can take both the side pieces, use the straight edge guide to dado out a nice little groove halfway, and then come back to the complete depth to roughly halfway through that 17mm bit of plywood. Fortunately, my 12mm fits in nice and snug, and that will be perfectly aligned on either side. Test fit and the main support shelf going in, again I think this is 12mm. Using real world measurements rather than actually getting the ruler out makes life a lot easier. That's a nice fit, and perfectly aligned because we cut them at the same time. I currently run a 125mm or 5-inch sanding system, but I'm making these slots big enough for 6-inch, just in case I ever step up. Doing a little backwards relief climb cut here will help prevent blowout when you push through for the maximum depth. Again, this one was pretty easy because it's also 12mm. Then I went to some 9mm stock instead, just to make things narrower. So I had to do this in a few passes and edged across the straight edge guide using a 6mm 1/4-inch router bit. And we got a nice fit there too. A lot of repetition in here, nothing terribly difficult about the construction. Find a piece of scrap that is approximately the right size, cut it down, sand off all the ugly gutter crap that's been stuck to it. And then where I need multiple pieces, I make one very nicely and use it as a template to get the second divider in this case that I need. These not only are vertical supports, but they will hold half sheets of sandpaper, the regular hand sandy type stuff. Here is that angled cut that I spoke about at the beginning, purely there for aesthetics. And this time I remembered to drill my shelf pin holes before I assembled everything. The little jig makes it nice and easy, although I did come a cropper with this later on, as you'll see, but for the moment it was looking good. They will be where I hold each of the discs. Assembly time. You can glue and screw or just glue and clamp this together. Because I'm lazy, I'm going to whack my glue in, put the rebates together, and just use the clamps to hold it nice and steady for a moment, while I whack in a few brad nails. This just means that I can keep progressing with the build and not have to wait for the glue to dry. But you could just leave it overnight if you wanted to. So there's the main box done. Taka taka taka. The support shelf with the pre-cut dados all ready to go. Marking out where I need to put a line of brads in to hold it all together. This was the only bit that caused me some grief. Not sure how I mismarked this out, but that little piece there, she's on a wee bit of an angle. I could have remade it, but ultimately I just didn't care. This is shop furniture, and it adds some rustic charm. Meh, who cares? Now this bit's unique to me, but I have got that electrical conduit coming down for the power point, so I had to mark out a relief channel in the back of my sanding station for that. So I could run Chopper Chris along one side and then carefully balancing him on that narrow edge, take him back the other way, and knock out the last little bit with the flush cut saw. And of course cut off the holes that I had previously drilled. Try to redo it, realise that I can't get my drill in, so bugger that, just came in from the backside instead. Those holes are going to be against a wall, so you won't see them anyway. I decided to put a cleat on here. It's not a French cleat, it's just a regular old one that I could drill into the brick wall. I've been wanting some countersink bits for ages, and I finally picked some up off Amazon. There are some decent quality ones, they're really nice, they work well, and they just save a step here. Very, very handy. Test fit, looking good. Drill through the cleat into the bricks, but if you want to see how I do that properly, well, you can see last week's video. I forgot to put the finger pulls in before I assembled and glued all this together, so out comes a giant cove bit in the router, and I carefully manoeuvred that into position. Dremel sander just to clean up the edges, that'll allow me to get the sandpaper in and out a bit easier. I did manage to blow out one of them, hence the little clamps there, but it was then time for the drawer manufacturing. How's this for a piston bit? Heh, not. But she's pretty damn good. There's a Louis instant replay. This is the simplest possible drawer you can make. 4 bits, measured, cut to size, held together with clamps, and bradded in. Nothing special. I've not actually ever used my rebate bit before, and I wanted to in this situation, but I don't have multiple bearings, and that particular cutter was far too big for the 12mm plywood drawer, so I got some 6mm MDF and just clamped that into position, and that gave me the correct spacing in order to rebate out my base correctly. It was messy as hell, but damn it worked, and I was pretty impressed with that. Nice little hack. And a lot more impressive than my dodgy hand tool skills, where I squared off the corners with a chisel, and then cut a 6mm bit of MDF, just to fit in there quite nicely. Glued down with a brick. We were really starting to reach the end of my scraps here, so I was getting some particularly dodgy bits of MDF, just notching out for that electrical conduit again, a step most of you won't need to bother with. And once I made one, I could use it as a template. And look at this state of this board. I've been using it as a cutting block for months, and it's becoming a shelf now. I remembered the finger pulls this time, clamped 4 of the bits together, and with a Forstner bit, could end up with 4 semicircles. Nice and easily for my shelves. Sticking with the scrap MDF, this is 18mm, and it will be my drawer front with my patent pending double chamfer on either side to avoid the hardware. Bit of CA glue, bit of wood glue on there, and some packers allows me to position the drawer front cleanly. Once it's grabbed, pull it out, clamp that down, nothing else. No screws in from the back, it's just going to be cheap and nasty like we said. some aesthetic trim stuck onto the top with another nice chamfer, and then using the planer to bring it down to the top because cutting small pieces like that is quite difficult. Sealing the MDF with some primer, a coat of Workshop Blue TM, and attaching it to the wall with a couple of screws. I of course had pre-drilled out through the bricks and got some plugs in there to hold it. They're the common grits that I use, just marked with a pen, and of course I'm stocking up with my favourite Abronets. If you want to know why, check the link above. The little drawer holds some sanding accessories, and Kevin finally has his brand new home next to his mate Dirk, the little sanding block. I hope you enjoyed that build, guys, and if you haven't already, of course, go subscribe to Making Sawdust, who is a generous supporter of this channel, and I'll see you on the next one.